Did Paro forget who he had enslaved? So this week's Parsha is the culmination of three Parshas, right? We're finally getting to the Exodus from Egypt. But if you go back over the last three Parshas, you're going to notice something really strange. So in Parshat Shmot, when Paro enslaves Am Yisrael, just before it happens, the reason he enslaves us, right, is because we're becoming really many. There's so many people, right? And he gets scared. When he talks about us at that point, he calls us Bnei Israel, the Israelites, the children of Israel. But from the point he enslaves us, all the way through the rest of these three Parshas, he never calls us Bnei Israel again. He calls us something else. And most of the time what he calls us is Ivrim. So what's the deal? What's an Ivri? So an Ivri is a really old name for the family. Avraham Avinu was called Abraham the Ivri. Now there's different opinions about why. Some people say because he was descended from Ever Ivri. Rashi brings that it was because he crossed over the river. When he came into Eretz Israel, he crossed over the river, Ivri being related to the word avar, to cross over. Okay, so it's really interesting. I mean, it's just another name for the family, right? Except for the Mitzrayim, it wasn't. Ivri was a despective term. Ivri was a slur. See, we can see that if we go back into Bereshit and we go back to the Yosef story. When Potiphar's wife talks about Yosef as a slave, she calls him the Ivri. The Torah records that the Egyptians wouldn't eat with the Ivrim because it was abhorrent to them. Ivri means the other, the different, the one from over there, the one that's not like us. For the Egyptians, it was a slur. So Paro, it makes sense. Once he's enslaved Bnei Israel, he wants to use a belittling name. So he starts calling them the Ivrim. Because for the Egyptians, Israel was a powerful name. Remember, they had a lot of respect for Yaakov Avinu. And Israel means in of itself one who strives with the angels of God, who strives with men, and who comes out on top. So obviously you want to change that name, give him a lowly name. But then the Parshat, then the Torah does something really strange. Moshe Rabbeinu calls the people the Ivrim as well. And he calls Hashem the God of the Ivrim. Now, if this is a slur, if this is a despective term, then why would Moshe use it? And why would he connect it to Hashem? It's because Moshe understood something about the relationship between Ivri and Israel that Paro didn't understand. See, Ivri, the Midrash tells us, is more than just Avraham Avinu crossed over the river. The Midrash tells us it's because Avraham Avinu crossed over and left the rest of the world on the other side. The rest of the world was over here in their paganism and their idolatry, right? And Avraham Avinu crosses over and stands alone by himself on the other side with his knowledge of the one God. And what's really interesting is when we get the name Israel, it's also from a moment of Ivri. You see, Yaakov Avinu was preparing to meet his brother, so he crossed his family over a stream, and then he went back and stood alone, avar, on the other side as an Ivri, as someone who crossed over, and he stood alone. And in that standing alone is when he was attacked and when he had this great spiritual struggle, right? And that spiritual struggle is how he got the name Israel. So Ivri and Israel are actually the same thing. Our ability to be those who stand alone is the same ability to be those who struggle and survive. And I think it's interesting because in this parsha, it seems like Paro understands what his mistake was. He wanted to call them Ivri. He wanted to weaken them. He wanted to belittle them. But in fact, what he was doing was connecting them back to their greatest strength. In this parsha, when he finally tells Moshe and Aaron, go, leave, what he says is get up and go. You and also Bnei Israel. He uses the powerful name again. He recognizes that the Ephraim were Bnei Israel the entire time. And today, we are Ephraim and Bnei Israel. What I've told you before is that Paro and Mitzrayim represent those things, those spiritual forces that hold us back, those things that keep us enslaved. And when we come at them, we have to come at them with our power of Bnei Israel and Ivri. How many times has fear, doubt, wondering what people are going to say, worry held you back from doing the right thing? When you knew you should have stood up and stood alone, and you didn't. When everybody suddenly started speaking Lashon Hara, and you didn't leave the conversation. When you should have stood up for someone, stood up for what you believed in, and you were too afraid. In those moments, be an Ivri. Stand up on the other side. Do not be afraid. You are Bnei Israel. You have the power to fight for what you believe in, and you are Ivri. You have the power to stand alone with your God. Be an Ivri. Be Bnei Israel. Be free.